Hey everybody, welcome back. So I wanted to come on today and talk a little bit about the idea of what we call chemical anxiety. I've had some people writing in and saying, Jen, you post these videos about how to deal with what's going on with these symptoms, but I've got chemical anxiety, and how do I deal with that? So I want to talk a little bit about, first of all, I think what people mean when they say that, what I meant in the past when I said that, and how I see it as different and or the same. So what I believe people are referring to, what I've referred to in the past, what you might be referring to as chemical anxiety, is that it's different than, oh, I had this, panic attack, or I've dealt with excessive worry throughout my life, or I was a worry wart, or I dealt with, different symptoms of anxiety through my life, and maybe that's what landed me on a benzo. Maybe it's not. Maybe it was never even an issue. Maybe it was subclinical anxiety, like just basically dealing with things, but it not disrupting my life. And then I think what people refer to in the world of withdrawal and discontinuation from medications is chemical anxiety. And I think what's meant here is the neuroadaptations that have happened as a result of being on medications that are going to, again, shift your neurochemistry, the adaptations that happen while you're on them, the adaptations that happen if you're having an adverse effect, the adaptations that happen when you're having a complicated discontinuation. And the chemical anxiety, for example, you might hear it as, your GABA receptors are downregulated. And so what does that mean? And we'll talk about that at some point. But so because my GABA receptors are downregulated, it can no longer use the neurotransmitter of GABA, which is a calming, inhibitory neurotransmitter. Because the receptor is somewhat compromised, it can't use the neurotransmitter functionally and well. I am not getting relief from the GABA glutamate balance that needs to be there. So I'm feeling more excitatory, which is the glutamate. I'm feeling more revved up. So that's part of it, is this idea of we know that GABA receptors are involved especially in the use of benzodiazepines. And as you're coming off the med, have been off the med, maybe you've had a rapid withdrawal, a cold turkey, again, maybe you've just had an adverse effect to it, there is evidence and thought that the GABA receptors are somewhat compromised, downregulated, and that we need time to neuroadapt for the body to go back into stasis. And in that meantime, you have what is referred to as chemical anxiety, which is that the neurochemistry has been altered by the use of these medications, and for some period of time, it's driving an anxious response. So what would happen, let's just extrapolate that out. Let's say there's truth to the idea of a downregulated GABA receptor, and we're not able to use GABA in a functional way to calm down. So we're in a more excitatory state. What does an excitatory state cause? It's going to create more of a fight or flight freeze response, right? So our autonomic nervous system, which is comprised of our parasympathetic, which calms things down, and our sympathetic, which revs things up, this whole system is somewhat compromised, right? So our nervous systems are kind of bamboozled and going, kind of going bonkers. And it's creating in our limbic system, which is a primitive part of our brain that's responsible for housing our emotional processing, our memories, as well as our threat response system, our all-important threat response system, our amygdala, the thing that sounds the alarm. The limbic system is highly impacted as a result of the nervous system being impacted, as a result of this chemical anxiety that people call it, neurochemistry kind of gone wild. And as the limbic system is lit up, you are in more of a perpetual state of fight, flight, or freeze. Okay. So then people will write to me and say, well, you're talking about, what do we do when we have DPDR? What do we do when we have panic and irrational fear, where we feel afraid of everything, where we have the dreeps, this constant feeling of foreboding and the dread and depression, and we don't feel like ourselves, and now we're developing health anxiety, and we've got all kinds of symptoms like POTS and dizziness and vertigo, and stomach problems, digestive issues, skin issues, you name it, right? When the nervous system is impacted, we know that, from head to toe, internally and externally, the electrical grid is off, and it can be impacted in any number of hundreds of ways. But going back to this idea of what do I do about this chemical anxiety, this isn't regular anxiety, this is chemical anxiety. What I would say to you is you wouldn't do much different, okay? Let me put it in a different way. Let's say I'm talking to somebody in my coaching practice who maybe isn't going through a benzo or a medication discontinuation or withdrawal. But let's say they're going through a really, really tumultuous perimenopause, okay? And as a result, they are dealing with a ton of 24/7 anxiety, 24/7 fight or flight symptoms, all kinds of things, right? And let's say they call me and they say, well, I can't go on bioidentical hormones to regulate my hormones. What do I do? We could say this is chemical anxiety too. Okay, and this is not, I'm not saying any of this to minimize or be dismissive. I'm saying this to normalize some things. That yes, if you're going through a complicated withdrawal, there is a neurochemical component to this that is happening along. This is not just, hey, you've developed some anxiety. I'm not saying that. I would never say that. I would also never say this is all in your head. Because number one, I don't believe that. Number two, even if you are just dealing with anxiety with no medication, injury, or assault, it isn't all in your head. Because your threat response system creates real symptoms to get your attention. And that's what's happening here. So let me go back to my example of, let's say somebody reaches out to me. They've never touched a benzo. They've never touched an antidepressant. But they're in the throes of perimenopause. They can't go on hormone replacement. And now they're dealing with 24/7 fear, dread, doom, gloom, depersonalization, headaches, all kinds of hormonal things, right? We could say for this person, they're also dealing with a chemical anxiety. And what do we mean by that? It means that the neurochemistry is off, that as their progesterone, estrogen, and testosterone are wildly fluctuating in the throes of perimenopause, it's impacting their levels of acetylcholine, of dopamine, of serotonin. It's impacting the GABA receptors. It's impacting the balance between GABA and glutamate. They're also, as a result of wildly fluctuating hormones that are happening because of a perimenopausal state or a menopausal state, they are experiencing a tag on that threat response system, okay, that goes beyond just, kind of typical anxiety. There's a chemical reason for why they're having increased anxiety. Okay, this is true of people that have PMDD, who have PMS, really bad PMS, postpartum anxiety, postpartum depression, perimenopause, menopause. Men go through this as well. I had a client that had dealt with prostate cancer, and the medications that he had to go on, and dealing with low T and things like that, impacted serotonin, impacted dopamine, can increase anxiety, all of these things. We could argue that those would be chemical anxiety as well. But the question is, what do you do? What do you do if the anxiety you're feeling is not brought on by your predisposition, and it wasn't really brought on by a precipitating event? It's you now have this neurochemical imbalance, this neurochemical shitstorm that may go on for months, may go on longer than that, and it's driving this anxiety. You still wouldn't do anything different, okay? Because you're still dealing with a threat response system, a limbic system gone bonkers, being afraid of everything. Everything is a threat. Everything is overwhelming. Everything is overstimulating, okay? You still experience all the same things that I've talked about in all my videos, where increased suggestibility, loss of confidence, personality disintegration and fragmentation, feelings of unreality, obsessionality, apathy, depression. These are the mental symptoms that you experience, right? Not to mention even the physical and cognitive symptoms that you experience. But when we're talking about, people are saying, well, but my experience going through benzo withdrawal or med discontinuation, and I have all this crazy fear and this terror and all this stuff. This is driven by a chemical anxiety, not regular anxiety. Regular anxiety is chemical anxiety. It's still the same chemicals. I get what you're saying, that a medication went in, altered potentially the biology temporarily of what's going on. Again, whether we call it downregulating GABA receptors or whatever. But I would argue that in people that are also not necessarily impacted by a medication injury, that we would look at their neurochemistry as operating somewhat similarly. Now, there could be an argument for, okay, like let's just use the perimenopausal example again. If I'm working with somebody and they've got debilitating panic attacks that started in perimenopause, and we know that as their hormones fluctuate wildly and they can't autocorrect with hormone replacement therapy, that they're going to have to learn how to live for some period of time because of the wildly fluctuating hormones of perimenopause with a chemical-induced anxiety that may or may not have been there and maybe wasn't there before they entered perimenopause. So there's going to be two things I'm going to be helping that person do. I'm going to be helping them get good at feeling shitty while they're in menopause. I'm going to be helping them learn to live alongside and allow for those symptoms to be there, the chemical anxiety to be there, while I simultaneously am helping them continue to teach their brain to not add second fear to the primary fear. We may not be able to do much about the neurochemistry, the hormonal and the neurotransmitter fluctuations that are the result of the perimenopause. Just like we can't really do much about the biology of withdrawal and the neurochemistry of withdrawal. But we can work on not adding a second layer of fear to that primary fear. Okay, and that's always the work. Always the work is, where am I potentially adding in a scary narrative to this really uncomfortable feeling, this really distressing symptom? That's always the work. So whether you're like, Jen, I didn't have anxiety before benzo withdrawal, and now I have chemical anxiety. Okay, so your argument is that because of this withdrawal process, because of this thing your body has gone through and your mind has gone through as a result of this, and because your neurochemistry has shifted now and we're in flux, that's what's driving the anxiety. Okay, I totally get that. What you would do is still the same thing. Where people go wrong in general with whatever nervous system problems they're dealing with, limbic malfunction, overall nervous system sensitization, is that if I employ the right strategies of like decide, evoke, allow, and live, my acronym DEAL, my anxiety is going to go down. Not necessarily. And certainly not necessarily in the throes of what you're deeming to be a chemical anxiety where you've got something driving it, right? So again, if we stay with the perimenopausal example, I can't pull somebody out of perimenopause, just like I can't pull somebody out of a complicated med withdrawal. So then what's the point? Well, there is a point, because while you're having these limbic misfires, while you're having this misperception of danger, which is what's driving the symptoms, the threat response system is getting overwhelmed. Okay, it's in an excitatory state. Because it's in an excitatory, not a calm state, it's getting false information. It's getting danger, 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 danger. Okay? I can't stop the perimenopausal state that's going to drive those misperceptions of danger. I can't do anything about the withdrawal in the moment that's driving the misperceptions of danger. But I can I can help you with what you do with the misperceptions of danger and the alarms as they're going off. So as the false alarms are going off and saying, oh my God, my person's in total danger, and we got to protect them, we can then work on the mindset and the behaviors that work at giving your brain the best chance at getting good information. The misfire, the malfunction, the chemical assault, it's sending misinformation that is then going to that part of your brain, that part of your brain is actually not necessarily malfunctioning. It's functioning perfectly. It's getting misinformation because of the chemical onslaught. So as you're getting misinformation, it's sounding the alarm, and then your brain and your body are doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing when you're in a state of danger. The problem is you're not in a state of danger. You're in a state of high distress. So the body is doing what it's supposed to do when it's in a state of high alert. It's supposed to make your world spall. It's supposed to make you not want to walk out of your door. It's supposed to make you be afraid of the world because it's trying to get your attention. Its whole job is to get your attention. It's working perfectly. The problem is it's getting misinformation because of the malfunction. Okay, so we have to do our best to then try to override that information with good information, which is, I know I feel terrified, but I'm actually not in danger. I'm just in high distress. And I need to recognize that my brain is always trying to learn something. Okay, so we can't control much about the withdrawal. We can't control much about the neurochemistry gone wild. We can't control much about people in perimenopause or people in perimenopause and withdrawal. And we could argue, well, just hold your hands up and throw your hands up and there's nothing you can do anyway. No, I don't believe that. I'm in perimenopause now. I won't take hormone replacement because of how my body has responded to medications and things in the past. I know that if I wasn't in perimenopause, I wouldn't be experiencing probably 98% of what I experience. But I am in perimenopause. My hormones are wildly fluctuating, and they're hitting my tin can of a nervous system and creating a whole lot of ruckus for me on any given hour or day. Nothing I can do about that. I'm not going to take a hormone replacement therapy. That's not saying you can't. It's just saying I'm not going to. So then I have to say, okay, so I'm going to probably feel anxious more than I typically would, number one, and more than the average bear. So am I just doomed? No, because I can now learn to teach my brain what to do with the false alarms of the anxiety. And while it might not make me feel better in the moment, number one, I'm not going to be creating bad habits that I'm going to now have to work myself out of. And number two, over time, I will be teaching my brain that I'm safe. When you're going through the limbic malfunction that you're going through as you're coming off these various medications or have been off for a while, that limbic system is misfiring. There is no doubt about it. That's why when I post something like, why are we so afraid? It gets quickly 1,000 hits because fear is a central part of this, whether we start to ruminate or we get obsessive or we get a health anxiety or we just terrified of our own selves, our own lives, our own people, the past, the future. Are we ever going to be okay again? Our limbic system is malfunctioning. It's getting misinformation. Something keeps tripping the wire. We can say the thing that's tripping the wire is the chemical onslaught, the neurochemical shitstorm, whatever you want to call it. It's tripping a wire and it's sending an alarm of danger. We then have to be in the seat of wise mind as best we can to say, I know the alarm is going off. I know this feels like I'm in danger, and I am not. So I'm going to do everything I can to continue to try to send messages back of safety. Really hard to do. For me, when I was in the throes of it and just really acute and just kind of couldn't find a foothold, I worked with a coach very, very, very often, very consistently. And I was careful that it wasn't so much about just constantly getting reassurance, but it was more about being witnessed to this and being reminded that this was temporary, being reminded that I wasn't going to stay stuck like this, being reminded of my own agency, and that, I might not be able to do much about the fact that hormonally I'm right in the smack middle of perimenopause hell, while I'm also in a compromised nervous system from having gone through what I've gone through with the medications. But what am I teaching myself moment by moment by moment? Am I freaking out? Am I thinking I'm doomed? Am I going down rabbit holes of doom and gloom and dread? What am I doing? What am I teaching my brain? Am I taking an opportunity mindset? So I hope this kind of makes sense. There's an early video I did. I don't know. I think there's 280 videos up now. Maybe it's in the first 20. And I think it says like, what the hell's going on here? And I break down kind of what's happening in our limbic system that leaves us in such a state of abject fear and lack of confidence and just feeling like we're a shadow of ourselves. That might be helpful to go back and listen to. But anyway, wanted to go on and try to answer this question as best I can. And I hope this was helpful. If you're interested in communicating with me about would we be a good fit, I'm not a good fit for everybody. There's a lot of people that I make sure get to the right people, whether that's Michael Priebe or David Powers or Jen Lay or Angela Peacock or Chris Page or my friend Dan, who's starting to do some coaching, and some other people. I want to make sure you're working with somebody that I think is going to be the right fit for you. I'm certainly not the right fit for everybody, but I'm happy to think with you about what that might look like. And I know most of these people personally, that I can help you, get their numbers and get to the right person. If you're interested in having that conversation with me via email, you can reach out to me, jenniferswanphd.com. And if I'm not the right person, I will help you find the right person. Okay? Take care, guys.